am Anna Seewald, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about personal development in the context of parenting, where I explore how you can find more calm, connection, and joy in parenting through the process of self-discovery and inner growth with a trauma-informed lens. I'm a parent educator, and my mission is to help children by helping parents. The motto of this podcast is raising our children, growing ourselves. Today, awakening greatness in children. Every child is unique. Can we appreciate and nurture our children to awaken their greatness? Can we see, honor, and support who they are without pushing our agendas on them? Can we let go of our own insecurities, fears, and expectations, develop faith, and just enjoy the process? I am speaking today with Howard Glasser. He's the creator of the Nurtured Heart Approach, founder of the Children's Success Foundation, sought-after speaker, and author of 15 books, including Transforming the Difficult Child, a long-standing bestseller on intense and challenging children. Howard currently teaches Nurtured Heart Approach certification training intensives at the Nurtured Heart Institute, as well as teaching at University of Arizona's Integrative Medicine program and the School of Public Health's new Transformational Wellness program. His upcoming book, due out in 2022, is an unfolding of the Nurtured Heart Approach from the inside out. In today's episode, we take a deep dive into his personal story, which is compelling. Howard was an intense child, largely misunderstood and mistreated by conventional methods of parenting. I'll be doing another episode with another guest about the Nurtured Heart Approach and the practical applications of it pretty soon. A little bit about the approach. The Nurtured Heart Approach is a relationship-focused methodology for helping children and adults build inner wealth and use their intensity in successful ways. The method has helped thousands of families, educators, and child advocates channel a child's intensity in beautifully creative and constructive ways. The Nurtured Heart Approach has been shown to create transformative changes in children diagnosed with ADHD, oppositional defiant disorder, reactive attachment disorder, and other behavioral, emotional, and anxiety-related symptoms, almost always without the need for long-term mental health treatment. Nurtured Heart Approach is currently being researched by Rutgers University, the University of Arizona's Zuckerman School of Public Health, and New Mexico State University. Our tendency as parents sometimes is to see what our children are doing wrong, what's not working, focus on the negative and the lack. According to Howard, kids read energy like Braille, and once we shift our energy from negative to positive, the intense, difficult, challenging child transforms. Please enjoy this heartwarming, deeply inspiring, and moving conversation with Howard Glasser. It deeply resonates with me. It's what I teach my parents. It's just phenomenal the way you present it. And just the name Nurtured Heart, it already just melts your heart right from the beginning.
Thank you.
That's why I said I have to have this person on the podcast. And I'm very happy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. The name was a name that came to me on behalf of somebody else's work that he was describing to me, and it just flashed 30 years ago, 40 years ago, that I suggested to him, maybe a good name for your work is Nurtured Heart Approach. And, by all measures, I should have forgotten that. I was doing woodworking at that point in my life, cabinet making. And I don't even know how it reoccurred to me because my work had no name for a long time. I wasn't trying to come up with an approach. That wasn't my agenda to create an approach. And when people started asking me, well, what do you call this? Thankfully I remembered, and it seemed so right. And my friend looked at me at the time and he said, closed his eyes and he thought about it. And he said, and then he looked at me with his big brown eyes, and he said, no, that's yours. And I'm going, what? How does that apply to me in my current life? So life is funny, and your books, your what you just said speaks to timing. You didn't know until you knew. Yeah. It's all actually all over New Jersey. It's in a lot of the programs in New Jersey now. It's all over the state because of one person. There had been a handful of people who got trained by me in New Jersey years ago, but one person emerged who knew the right people at the right time, who were they were actually looking to kind of save themselves because the system lost kids to harm. And there were kids who were getting safe holds, or what's called safe holds, and workers were getting hurt. There were lawsuits. There was a death. They were trying to stop the bleeding. And anyway, it's a long story, but here we are 5 years later, and it's really taken root in your home state. So
I'm very proud of that. I'm proud of that. And I am embarrassed that I didn't even know. But like you said, the timing is right. And that's why I want to promote this on the podcast. I have this vehicle. I've created this. I have a global community, and they love what I do, what I teach. They follow, my philosophy. And this is perfectly aligned with my philosophy.
That's so exciting.
And you know what?
I have heard about authentic parenting, but because of my makeup and my life, I stay so hyper-focused on, while I was incubating my work, I, of course, knew about other people's work, but I didn't want it to, I wanted to stay tuned to the channel I was on, and I didn't want to take in other people's work without proper attribution, or I didn't want it to come from outside. I was so fixated on that and adamant that, yes, there are great, great, great elements of other work.
That's what I love about your work. It's spiritual. It has spiritual element. I don't know if you view it that way. I don't.
Absolutely.
I don't view it as a model, even the word model or approach. I feel like this is very spiritual. That's why I connected with it. And
thank you.
It's very beautiful. And it truly shows your spirit, your soul, your spirituality through this. I can definitely feel that.
It came from my spirituality. It came from my love of spirit, and not in any delineated way, not through any one channel, appreciative of all channels of spirit. And it's definitely a reflection. And I feel like the job I was given was to bring something forward that spoke to all faiths and traditions and cultures, and to not give it the appearance of spirituality. I didn't want any deal breakers. I didn't want to alienate. So I felt like my job was to imbue it with spirit without pushing that in the slightest.
I'm also interested in your art, in your woodworking. Definitely you're connected to the creative, what I call the creative force, the creative energy. And so I love that. I'm an artsy person too. And it's just wonderful when you connect to someone's art, you feel them, right? That they fill you up in a different way, be that music, be that art, be that sculpture, or any kind of creation. I'm a huge art lover, maker, creator. And the woodworking, I'm like, wow, interesting. My daughter is into woodworking. She's in seventh
Really?
grade. Yes.
That's exciting. I
That's
love it.
yeah.
I love, my daughter grew up as an artist. The work in the background is all hers. And, she did the book covers, and it's very excited. I'm sure you're applauding her and being hugely, I could hear it in your voice, how deeply appreciative you are of her, of her spirit that's coming through in woodworking. I think that's great. I actually dropped out of my PhD program to take a 1-year break because I wanted to live my childhood dream of woodworking. And I didn't want to let that pass because I had gone straight through school, and it was kind of gnawing at me to at least honor that for a little while. And 1 year became 15 years. So go figure. And then my academics, the allowance of time expired. So it wasn't for me, I think, to have that full on academic credential, because I'm pretty sure I would have been an idiot. If I think I would have been as stuck up. I went to a good school. I probably would have had my nose up in the air. I'm refraining from using bad language, and I probably would have been, a much lesser person had I not pursued woodworking. It allowed me to go and have time to follow my bliss, follow my spiritual path, and to live life. So it also allowed me to, not having a PhD allowed me to be a little bit of a maverick, to fly in the face of what I knew would be shunned in my community. I mean, you hearing Dr. Sylvester speak about Nurtured Heart, she's, I consider her and lots of other people too as exceptions. I don't think it's easy to break away from the very staid, academic approved best practices, well-researched practices. I think you have to have a lot of verve to break away. And I didn't teach anybody what emerged in my practice for a long time. People would ask me, once my reputation for actually changing lives got out there, as this developed, or it developed me, I would say, all of a sudden the faucet opened and people would ask me, can I do presentations? And I went, I don't do presentations. I don't know how to do presentations. I have no sense of how to do a PowerPoint or a organized talk. I wouldn't even know how to organize my thoughts on this. But really behind the scenes, I thought people in my profession would think I was bizarre and laughable. I was afraid of that too. But it was true. I had no skills as a presenter. And there was a time when I started doing parenting classes in Tucson, where I live, and I borrowed space. I looked for space everywhere. And I found an organization that lent out its space for a very low cost. And at some point, I felt kind of indebted to them. And for over a year, they twisted my arm. We've heard about your work. We'd love to have our staff have an in-service. And I kept saying, no, I don't do that. And I finally did one. You'll laugh at this. And I thought it was the worst day of my life. It was so distasteful to me. It was so distressing to me. I thought it went so poorly. And many other impinging energies of frustration. And I've written about this a little bit somewhere. I'm sure you may have come across it. A couple of weeks later, I was just shopping in the supermarket, and somebody taps me on the back and he says, "Hi, I'm Armando Zurita." And he introduced himself as a person who ran a department at that organization. And he said, everybody in my department is using your approach now, and we're having great results. And I went, no, I don't want to hear that. But it dawned on me slowly but surely in the weeks to come that There was a certain responsibility. And that's good for me to say out loud so I could hear myself right now, because I feel like, I'm at an age where, I'd like to head for the hills and have more time. And I'm just taking on new levels of responsibility. And I feel like, okay, this has been given to me. To go back to what you initially said, this was not something I went to the literature and culled the research and tried to find the 10 best techniques to do parenting. This came out purely in my dreams. I would wake up at 3 a.m. and write things down or get metaphoric images, and I try them out in my practice. This all came from my dream world, and I try to stay faithful to it. That's been my job. My job has been to bring splendor into form. And I feel like that's been the gift to my life, because otherwise I'd be a very ordinary person. I can't tell you how mundane my life would be if not for this one spark of thread in my life. And so I've done a great job of honoring that and staying true to it. There have been a bunch of people who've pushed on me to do otherwise and to make it otherwise, but it's come through in this form. And I feel like it dawned on me that teaching an approach through stories was the way to go.
It's so interesting that you honored it, you gave it its flow, its life, you let it lead you. You were connected to it. You didn't push it away, shove it under the rug, or turn the volume off and said, this is not right. You didn't question, you just went. That's why that spiritual element, I sense it. It's a good lesson for all of us, just to be who we are, who we're meant to be, and bring the gifts of ourselves to the world, because all of us have something to offer to the world. But somehow, in our childhood, throughout our life, they beat it out of us, that spirit, the spirituality, the authentic self, and we become disconnected from who we are. And then later, when you become older, you start to search for who you are, But I think your personal story is powerful too, because you were an intense and what you call a difficult child. I would love for you to speak about that a little bit. Like, how was it growing up and being misunderstood, and all of those gifts that you have were probably perceived as bad behaviors, as let's correct him, let's get rid of it. I work with parents, and that's what you hear. How can I change my child? How can I fix my child? I had one father say to me, during the pandemic, I'm yelling at my kid. I'm even hitting him. I want you to give me techniques, work with my son, he asked me, and help him to adapt to my yelling, because the world is going to be a cruel place. He's going to work for a boss. He's going to go into the world. So here is this man. I said, are you kidding me? There's nothing wrong with your kid. Look at yourself, buddy. You want your kid to adapt to your ill methods, yelling, the beatings, so that you need to look at yourself, right? And it was startling, but I'm not blaming him. He comes from a trauma background. We all bring stuff from our past. And like I said, I work with court-ordered people who have to take parenting classes. I work with people who killed their children through beatings and spankings, in fact. And so while it's hurtful to see that, how the trauma can pass through one generation to the other, and this is my mission to stop this. And when I say my mission is to help parents, because my mission is to help children, really, I have children's interest at heart. I'm helping the parents because I care for the kids. And this is why your approach talks to me, so deeply. Yeah. So I want to know, what kind of child were you? How were you misunderstood in this world with all of your sensitivities and gifts? I can only imagine. If you're open to sharing, maybe even a story that's
I'll let it flow. I'll start by saying, I have a now 30-year-old daughter who grew up. She was child number one. She grew up entirely under this method, which it occurred to me at some point that, I could be just another psychology person who has wild and woolly secret life of challenges with my own kid. This is why I want to say this as a starter to your question. I'll answer your question, is that she's grown up following her wisdom. She certainly could have been an academic superstar and done anything she wanted, kind of in the top few of every school she ever went to. And she had the guts to follow her dream to do art. And she has found her way to a life that's of her own making. Kids who have inner strength, I call it inner well. I've been watching keenly to see how this works out. And they have the wherewithal to handle their own intensities, their own life force. I'm a fan of life force. I think the very same life force that could take us down and drag us through the mud is the very same fuel for our fire, the fuel for our greatness. And she's, working in concert with other people beautifully as a team player. She's found situations in her life to earn her living. And kids who graduated from her art school, Rhode Island School of Design, got swept away by corporate America to, in six-figure jobs right out of school. Facebook, Google, everybody took the top tier of her school because they wanted creative people. And she resisted that. She said, I don't want to wind up in a corporate setting 30 years from now. So she's had that inner strength. I grew up not having that inner strength. I certainly had a lot of life force. I was a good kid. I got stuck in a pattern that I couldn't get out of on my own. And people could go up to me all day long and say, Howard, shape up. You need to shape up. And certainly rough me up in attempts to shape me up, and kept amplifying the roughing up to shape me up. That kept making things worse. So, from the inside out, I had the experience, I think it's actually whoever wrote the script of my life made it perfect. I did not have insincere, unloving parents. I had parents who just wanted the best for me, but they had no clue. My dad, if he was still alive, would have been 111 this week. So, a different generation coming out of the Depression and coming up with no parenting models. He was raised by his eldest sister, essentially. And, a large family raised it at the end of Depression, it through Depression. And, they were simply trying the best they could with what they knew. And when I didn't respond or responded actually adversely, they kept, on their expedition of going further into drastic and punitive, and and what made it worse is I have a brother who was a superstar. Why can't you be like Joel? He not only was valedictorian, he was valedictorian plus. He of his own volition would go, study Russian and French and, everything he could read, and a savant kind of person. And it turns out he had his own path too, but I didn't know that at the time. And I even if I wanted to be like him, I didn't know how. I was just trying to survive and being an intense kid. And maybe this is part of for your audience to hear. I feel like every intense kid, we're all intense. We all have our life force. To me, it's one and the same. And if anybody listening to this wakes up tomorrow morning and your life force is gone, you'll either be dead, or you won't be able to get out of bed, or you won't be able to fulfill your checklist for the day, or you won't be able to live your passionate life. We need our life force. The last thing I ever want to do is medicate a kid, medicate away, or, I understand it's considered best practices, but it's not in my world. I want to salvage that same intensity for human beings so they could see the beauty of it. It informs us of our greatness and who we are. So I think my experience from the inside and outside, watching these kids keenly, is that when you have more than your fair share of intensity, however it arrived, whether it's from birth, certainly that happens, whether it's from you acquire it along the way because of stressors in your family, in your neighborhood, in trauma in the community, in the world, you are going to have then more than your fair share of need for connectivity. That's what I see. Is it's linked. Is that my intensity led me to have a more intense need for connectivity, which is kind of, to me, linked to relationship. How do I get it? Well, I couldn't get it through doing the right thing because the bar was too high in my family. And anyway, all they had was good job and thank you. Once in a blue moon, brother was able to get by on that, on fumes, but it wasn't enough for me. And I had, an equally intense need for knowing I existed, not being invisible. And the only way I was visible was I discovered inadvertently was by acting out. I didn't start out that way out of the chute. That came about at some point when I ran into whatever non-okayness that somebody held as their belief. And, I ruffled somebody's feathers and all of a sudden I was getting a ton of relationship. That's how it worked back then. It still works that way. People leaned in and got excited and yelled at me and chastised me and lectured me. And here I was. People say they're busy these days, but nobody's ever too busy for problems.
Oh my gosh. It takes the same amount of time and effort, if not more, to do the negative stuff than to do the positive
Absolutely.
stuff. Correct? We spend
Absolutely.
the time, we spend the effort. It's just funny. Is there a particular story from your childhood? Like, were you cognizant of this dissonance between, the outside world, the teachers, the parents, and you? Were you thinking, what's wrong with me? Like, what was going on internally for you? I would love to hear that.
I was one of those kids, there were many, who had the shades down, and I'm not going to let anybody in. I was a smart kid who got big fat zeros in pretty much every class in school. People didn't know what to do with me, but I had, thanks to my brother, a love for mathematics and a love for English. It had nothing to do with my school. It had to do with him. I was good at it. It just came naturally to me. So 2 things. One is, at the same time that they wanted to leave me back in 6th grade, I had gotten the highest grades on the standardized tests, the highest percentile, and they weren't allowed to leave me back, although it pained them because they wanted to punish me for behavior. So I did get promoted to a school that was for, I guess you would call it, for gifted, smart kids now, whatever the current term is. And I got better exposure to teachers who love teaching. So the backdrop to that was all through grade school, I failed miserably, except for the couple of teachers who saw me. So I was the worst kid in everybody's class, except for 2 teachers where I was the best kid. So I had that experience as I don't know that I even had the wherewithal to think I have something to lean on or I'm getting confirmation, but I'm not sure what people made of me back then, other than, being an odd duck. But that was really powerful for me to at least have that. That's why I feel like
At least
all
you
it
had
takes
those
is one person.
experiences, right?
Yeah.
To sort of give you confirmation that,
It's confirmation of who
yeah,
I was.
yeah.
And they weren't even gifted at acknowledging me so much. But I felt like they were speaking to me, and they were acknowledging me, but they didn't have the language for it. It really made a difference. And I feel like in every story I've ever read of a person's rising out of the ashes of gangs, or I remember one Sunday pull out magazine in my hometown here, and there were maybe a dozen or so stories of kids who rose from horrifying circumstances, and they all spoke about one person: an aunt and uncle, a grandparent, a pastor, somebody who believed in them. So what does that mean? Okay, so I'm going to give you, here's a good story. I was doing an in-service once, and one kid, so teachers after school, 3 p.m., one kid didn't have a ride home. There was, the parent was having an emergency, couldn't, so there was 40 teachers in this room as I'm talking, and there was one kid who was waiting for their parent to arrive. And I took advantage of that time, because I love those opportunities, to appreciate him in the way I wanted to teach appreciation. I feel like we could be radically appreciative. We have this incredible ability to see the greatness in kids and to speak to that. Why wait for the memorial service? Why wait till we're speaking humorously about, it's not funny, not humorous, about somebody, and telling everybody robustly about how great they were. So I was doing that with this young man. Then they got notified that his parent arrived. Somebody escorted him to the street, and then came back in the room and raised their hand and said, "You know what he said? He said, that man really believes in me." And it was like a light bulb went off. Oh, that's what people mean by believing. How do you convey, I believe in you? Well, I could say all day long, Anna, I believe in you. I believe in you. But that's nothing compared to being the belief, a demonstration of the reality of what believing in somebody is. And to me, it was screaming. It was like a neon sign that said, "This is the way you prove yourself as believing in somebody." And it's indelible for me.
That's all we want, right? From another human being, from other people, just to be visible, to be seen by them for who we are, for our greatness, to feel important, to feel like we matter. Mm-hmm. I just lost my dad, a month ago, and what made him special, people have been asking, I've been saying that my dad loved me like no one else loved me in this life. But it's not just the love, because everybody loves their kids, but exactly that. He made me feel important. He made me feel special, visible for who I was truly. He didn't want me to change a thing about myself. And that's what made it, for me, growing up like that, an invaluable experience. And I wish I can give that to my daughter to the degree that I received that. And I know I'm very lucky. I mean, I didn't have my mom. She died in an earthquake when I was 13, but I was lucky and grateful to have a father like that. And
I hear how profoundly
I
hear how profoundly you received the gift of his giving you that endowment, that inheritance, the real inheritance of believing in yourself.
That's the true gift that we can give to our children, right? Because most parents focus on the future, on the success, that they want to make their kid to be somebody, to earn money, to go to this college. But they're missing the point. If you nurture your child's heart from an early age with your approach, similar philosophy in similar way. If you see the flower, if you protect the flower, nurture the flower, that flower will bloom and have a scent and a color, and it's unique. And you just admire that and be with that flower.
Mhm.
That flower will give its beauty to others. Like most people are focused on the outcome of the result, like in the future, that does not even exist. So they miss out on this
Mhm.
beautiful present experience of being with their children, seeing their beauty, embracing it, accepting it, and just nurturing it so that children will blossom into themselves.
Yeah.
And it's so
Yeah.
simple.
I
It's so
love that.
simple.
I love that analogy.
Yeah, because every flower is different and unique. But no, they want all flowers to be the same and to fit into the mold and to grow the same way, to yield the same, it's like, wow, this is not right,
Yeah.
you know?
It takes a lot of faith and trust to take that path that you're talking about. I see how moving it is for you and how exciting it is for you and how real it is for you and how urgent it is for you. Those are beautiful qualities.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of faith as a parent to take that path. But I think the game changer for me, where even if that parent doesn't have that perspective that you have and doesn't have that belief, that it's okay for my child to be different and to be idiosyncratic and one of a kind, and to take, what I try to do is incidentally, as a secondary gain of my work, is to create, I am really convinced that by way of the deep appreciation that parents often arrive at taking my approach, that they build inner wealth. And by that, I mean the child's accruing sense of who they really are. If I say to a child who's in kind of the image I have is, it's a house with siblings and the kids are finishing their homework and gonna get ready for bed soon. And I walk up into my kids' rooms and I say, "Good job." It's such a vague, it's a well-intended comment, but it's so vague and it doesn't have
It's empty. It's empty.
any teeth to me. If I say "Good job, Annie," you have no idea what I'm inferring. But if a parent says, if they, by way, whatever impetus they have, because maybe the kid's been annoying and they pick up my book on, annoying kids, and they decide to give this a try and they start appreciating the child in a different way. Like, I appreciate that you have remained focused on your homework. I know that's difficult and there's so many distractions, and you've also turned down your music so it doesn't annoy your sister, and that's an act of kindness, and you're showing respect for her and you're being responsible. You could be not doing any of those things. You could be wanting to speak to your friends and wanting to take a break and watch TV, but you aren't. You're being determined to get through your work. Those are great qualities I see in you. You are being those qualities, and my faith is in inner wealth. So I believe
that. Yeah,
that all of those comments contribute to the funding of that investment that grows. I don't believe the nonsense of 1% and 99%. I know that's true fiscally, but I think every child can be an inner wealth billionaire. And that what I see emerge is, if a child grows up with that growing confirmation of who they are, having been seen for who they are, then they have the verve to go off and be independent, despite their parents' worry that, oh, if you're not the same as everybody else, they have the verve to stand up and say, I'm not going to go to college. I'm going to go. Or they have the verve to say, I'm scared of college, but I'm going to go anyway. They have the verve to live their life regardless of the people trying to remotely steer them in one direction or another. My daughter is going to do what she's going to do. Yeah. And I don't get any votes. I realized that when she was 12. It's like, oh, this is interesting. This is interesting. She's smarter than me. She's wiser than me. She's more in touch with her feelings. I no longer have any votes. Yes, I have to show up as a parent, and I'm going to show up as a parent, but my oversight has expired. And I think that was a great wake-up call for me, because, I think every parent understandably has a desire for kids to fit in and to...
It's because of our own insecurities, because we are disconnected from our true authentic self. I think it's because of that reason, because we were not allowed to be like that. And now we're out of touch with our own self, the energy, the harmony. And so we want to mold other people, shape other people to feed our, insecurities, feed our own stuff, but it's not about us.
Yeah.
That's why, we need to connect to our own authentic self. That's what I call, so that we can see.
You're dead on.
Yeah, so
You're
that
exactly right.
Right. So we can raise our children because they are already whole, complete, authentic. They're being.
If you went up and interviewed any parent and said, is that your agenda to steer them into, living your life in not living their life? Nobody would say that's what they're doing, but people insistently do it in their own subtle ways anyway. I understand the tendency. So I've really looked at how do we help parents to, because I think as somebody gives appreciation to another human being, even if it's because they go for family therapy sessions with Dr. Sylvester, and she's steering them in this new direction. And even if it doesn't fit them and they don't like it, it's not how they grew up, but they do it anyway. They grow too. Yeah. Their inner wealth grows. Yeah. Their ability to see the beauty of what they're giving and churning grows. So, I have grown into, I have a new endeavor that I am taking on. I'm no longer with the Children's Success Foundation. I'm teaming up with some people to do Nurtured Heart Institute as a learning platform and a teaching platform. And we are exploring how we're going to bring this to adults directly too, because I have stayed focused, true to me. I've stayed focused on my main agenda of kids, intense kids, but I get evidence all the time. There are 3,000 trainers out there of this work, and many of them have branched out into using it corporately or culturally in their organization, or in their partnership, in their relationship, in their friendships. It seems to bleed out in an interesting direction. So I'm following the path I've been given, and it's taken me to what you're saying now is, well, what's the implications of this work that's been kind of insulated, and focused on one group of how do we help parents who have these kids who aren't just succumbing to the easy path. Yeah. And I'm excited about seeing if I could branch out a little bit.
Yeah, that's lovely. In 2016, something happened in my life, and it was like a second wake up call, type of thing in someone's life. And I woke up sort of from that experience, and I said, wow, we need to appreciate people in our life. I've always been appreciative, because I lost everything when I was 13. So I have a different outlook to life and appreciation for people and that kind of stuff. when you survive something severe. But then in 2016, something else happened and it just completely shook me. And I started making a conscious effort, saying words of appreciation to the people in my life, to my clients, to my neighbors, to little kids, to whoever I touch in my life, whoever I encounter. Not insincerely, but being truly it requires presence, right? You're not just going to go and say, hey, I love your top, I love your necklace. It's not what we're talking about, but true appreciation for their qualities, for their humanness, for something that is special about them in that moment, or to the encounter you have with them. So I made this practice from 2016 of mine, and it shook people a little bit, because I reached out to people. It takes vulnerability to say those kind of things to people. People are not used to.
Mm-hmm.
And it, I think, requires presence. I'm wondering, do you agree with me about the vulnerability part, about the presence part? Because you have to be present with someone to truly receive them and appreciate something about them in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And people have complimented. Yeah. They always say, wow, you're so this, you're so that. But I made this conscious effort to just appreciate people in my life, because I may not have this life tomorrow or in 5 minutes. So I don't want to have stuff unsaid in my heart, because it can make people's lives more richer, right? Why should I hold it within myself? Yeah. I should just give the gift of appreciation to whoever deserves it.
Yeah, I what a remarkable story. And I can only imagine what happened when you were 13 being so overwhelming, and you emerging from that, and then having that epiphany in 2016 to give all of you and be that present. I have found that people, especially, I no longer have a private practice, but when I was open to the public and was encountering people, I didn't have any jurisdiction over who was coming in that door. I couldn't bank on a person being awakened or enlightened or highly present. So, in my larcenous way, what occurred to me was, let me see if I can meet them where they're at. And not have to stand on their toes or berate them, but have techniques that, and I have a good story that occurred to me now that I can tell you about this, that can meet them where they're at and give them a foothold and handhold on finding the truth of the moment, which might be equal to being present. It may not be the same exact thing as being present, but I'll give you an example. So I got an emergency call once upon a time about a family who was new to Tucson. They had just moved from the deep South and had a 13-year-old daughter who was out of control. And all I got was, there was no formal systemic evaluation like would ordinarily come. There was no central intake, from the system. All I got was, this girl is angry, flares up, cusses and swears 24/7. And can you and can you see her ASAP? So I came into the office on a Saturday morning within a day or two, and I met with this woman who had a truly deep Southern accent, and was sitting there perseverating. And it was a single mom and this 13-year-old girl. And the mom was completely perseverating on, I am so worn out. I am, saying it in a Southern accent, like I couldn't do. Just over and over again, I'm so worn out. And all I had was, here's this girl who's sitting on the couch, turned away, looking in the other direction, her arms folded, looking fuming. And I said, I hear that you're worn out. I am in amazement that you, even though you're worn out, had the wherewithal to get emergency help. This is not easy to do. However you engineered that, in whatever power you conjured up, you are magical because this doesn't happen. I feel imperative for me to help you, but all I got is one method. So I got to see if my method works. If it doesn't work, I got to refer you to somebody, because this girl had been in 2 out-of-home placements, 2 hospitalizations as a child up through that age. And anyway, I said, all I got was this piece of paper. So I'm completely transparent. And I say, so I am deeply appreciative of your skill set, despite being worn out. Those are great qualities, your wisdom to get to this moment. I said, all I got was this piece of paper that says your daughter flares up 24/7, cusses, swears, angry outbursts. And I said, I'm looking at her right now, and I'm in awe that she's mad about being here. It's clear that she's mad. She's handling her strong feelings really well right now. Whatever she's doing to handle her strong feelings and whatever she's feeling doesn't matter so much as she's being powerful right now. She's being wise. She could be screaming and yelling and cussing as far as this note is concerned. So are you aware of that? And she nodded her head. And I said, can you let her know? So how not great would it be if she was cussing and swearing? And she said, not great. And I said, can you let her know that you appreciate that she's making a choice right now so I didn't lecture her on being present. I didn't berate her for the past. I just dialed in this little sliver of life. And I said, can you put into words your appreciation, the fact that she's apparently doing something stunning right now, remarkable right now. And the mom turned to her. It took a while. She didn't find the words right away. I said, I'm going to stand on your toes if you don't say something. You got to say something. And I get that you're feeling something. I get that there are words there. I see that coming, but I'm waiting for the words. And I trust that you're going to say the words. And, with a tiny bit of prompting, she said something that was wild, that probably she had never said before, that was deeply appreciative. They both broke out in tears. This was not an educated woman. This is a low, I would say, on the scale of high to low functioning, she was towards the low functioning end of things, and probably only had models of old conventional traditional parenting. And I felt like I was working with the parent. So I was doing to the parent exactly what I want them to do to the child or with the child. And they both burst out in tears. They had a love fest. And then I just went up one side and down the other with the mom about how remarkable she was to say what she said and how fantastic it was. And of course, it went from there. And that woman became an extraordinary parent. Despite her low functioning.
We're so focused on what's not working, what's lacking. You're not doing this. I hear as people, as partners, as humans, as parents, we're always focused on the negative, right? As parents complain about their children, she's not doing this, she's not listening, they're not picking up after themselves. All the negative. About partners, I want my partner to do this, he's not doing this, he's not initiative, he's not planning trips, he's not doing this. We always focus on what's lacking. And so we sort of lose perspective of the goodness, the positive, of what's working, the strengths that are present in our life. And once we shift that perspective, then we can see and be grateful and appreciative and highlight and bring it out. And things shift, right? It's very interesting.
It's exciting.
Yeah, I love how you say children read energy like Braille. I love that statement. It's just like punches you. It's just like so true.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Here we are thinking we're giving the best lecture ever.
Yeah.
And we're being completely reasonable and rational and logical. And underneath what we are saying, kids are reading the energy, which is the truth of the moment, So, when they're being respectful, they get at most a thank you, good job. But when they're not being respectful, they get 10 minutes of this world-class leaning in and verbiage, and we're poets when things go wrong. And kids read the Braille of that energy and go, well, they say they love respect, but they actually love disrespect. And I know that's a brash statement. I am utterly aware that that's a wild statement. What do you mean my child loves this? What do you mean I love disrespect? Well, if that's what I'm giving the gift of me to, that's what I'm giving the gift of me to. It's plain and simple. If I do lip service to respect and responsibility, and all I got is good job and thank you, I'm dead. I don't stand a chance. So, we may get away with that if we got an easy kid. I'm not saying there aren't kids with easygoing temperaments who can get by on crumbs. It's true. Unfortunately, it's true.
Yeah, you're right. But some of those kids, they need that. Especially, we always see their negative and emphasize the negative. Now they feel insecure. They feel less self-confident. They feel horrible about themselves. They need it the most. They need it the most. I love also how you say, are you watering the flowers or the weeds?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's really, really, really tempting in our culture. I mean, most of us grew up in the world culture of being exquisitely gifted at seeing what's wrong. And I remember one time I went in my daughter's room and the room had been cleaned, and I'm looking around, and of course, as a parent, you could see 10 things that could have been done, like either better or the future of what needs to be done at some point. And it was funny. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I got lost in the weeds of it's like a little bit of gas on a fire that you're trying to put out is a little bit of gas on the wrong fire. As much as I was striving to not ever, my stand of parenting is, one of the stands is absolutely no, I'm not going to give me to that, to negativity. But I did. And she looked at me and she said, Dad, you're not using your method. She was like 12 years old. It was hilarious. And we had a good laugh, and the other stand is absolutely yes. What am I going to give? What am I going to give me to? What am I going to give my time, my relationship to? Kids read energy like our computers read broadband. Nobody wants to go back to dial-up. Everybody wants better broadband. Where do I get the better broadband? That was all unbeknownst to me when I was a kid, but I was seeking better broadband. And, I got better service essentially for my negativity. Even though I was a good kid in disguise, I wasn't going to let anybody know that. I wasn't trying to make my parents miserable. It was just drawn to. It's compelling. How do I get the relationship I need, albeit negative? It's a terrible sacrifice of lives, and it's irretrievable sometimes. I mean, part of the reason I fight so hard in my work is because the way I grew up, it was irretrievable. Relationships with my important elders in my family were irretrievable at some point. They were broken. I don't take that for granted that a kid's going to want to be with their parents when they grow up or want to be around them. They might distance themselves. I want people to have the ability to engineer that authentic parenting that allows for them to have rich, loving relationships that are based on seeing who we really are, who one another really is, that's rewarding. What a unfortunate situation for a child to grow up divorced from their parents, and for a parent to have that tragedy of essentially losing their child to distance and a lackluster.
Yeah. Were your parents, when you were older and successful, and with your work and everything, with your woodworking, when you were not a child anymore, or when you were successful,
Right.
were they able to see your greatness and appreciate, or it was lost, the relationship to that degree?
They had another image of how they wanted me to be in the world. They would have loved for me to be an accountant and that wasn't going to be my path. And they came around, they did, to being very appreciative of who I was. But the point I'm trying to make is I tried to love them back at that point. And from their point of view, I probably did, but in measly ways. I feel like what I had left to give them was measly. I know the truth is that I had closed that door. And I mean, I hate for me to say that, but it was too late. And something had expired. It's heartbreaking. I've never said that in public, in that so many words, but I wasn't doing it to be hurtful to them, and I wasn't doing it to be hurtful to myself. It's just there was no pathway left for me to be as giving as I hope kids are with their parents, or connected to their parents. It's not a matter of moving in their house or spending time, or it's I have an adult daughter. I don't get to see her that often, but I feel very connected to her, and I know that's mutual, and it doesn't have to be that way. I think we can build in the wiring so the connection is dedicated, like in the internet world, you're online to one another, and it doesn't have to be, we don't have to be there every minute cheering them on or being appreciative. It becomes alive in the connection becomes has a life of its own.
I think when we nurture the heart of the child, that nurtured heart gives generously and nurtures the world and gives the world what it was poured into. It's so heartbreaking what I'm hearing. It touched me so much for some reason, and it reminded me. And it reminded me of another interview I did with Mark Nepo. Do you know Mark Nepo, the poet and the spiritual?
I don't know him personally, but I know.
Yeah,
I know
you know
of him.
Yeah, so I interviewed him on the podcast, and just like your parents or some other parents, they expected him to be different. But he was as he says, I was a mystical poet, and they never accepted him for who he was.
Yeah.
And it was
I know he has a book of. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
please.
No,
I'm reading. I'm listening on audiobooks to his book of awakenings. Yeah, and actually, I in a conversation with a friend, his name came up yesterday. So he's cherished.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I will never forget that moment in the conversation. I asked him similar questions, and it was very moving. The way he spoke about that relationship, that loss, that two-sided, right? Loss. And I also can relate to what you're saying, what you have with your daughter, because I lived in America. My dad lived in Armenia. For 20 years, I didn't live there, but this immense connection and the it's there. You don't have to live in the same household to have that love, to feel that love.
Yeah, exactly. He invested in his, whether he knew it or not, consciously or unconsciously, he gave you the gift of inner wealth. And he insistently let you know you were seen and appreciated for who you are. That's what I'm hearing. And that then becomes a life of its own. You then can go out and do I see how deeply authentic you are, and in real time, and you are bringing that to other people. If I were gonna give a nurtured heart compliment to you, if people listening want to know kind of, okay, what's it sound like? I'll do it in real time. I don't think it's easy to let yourself feel so deeply as you're feeling right now, and touch the way you're touched right now, and being so agile with your ability to handle your strong feelings, powerful emotion, and the reference to Mark Nepo and his life. And I appreciate how thoughtful and caring you are, in how you have spent time with me, interviewing me, kind of digging in to my life and wanting to know more. And what that reveals to me about you is your great heart, your desire for realness, your desire for... See, this is where I'm trying to go from my head to my heart, because my heart has an infinite vocabulary. That's where my mystic poet is, in my heart. If I'm in my head, I run out of words. But if in my heart, I can say, the truth of what I'm gathering, having met you for the first time in this way on interview, is that you care so deeply about the welfare of the world and the welfare of children, and how it goes and how they grow up and their well-being. You're a clarion for the well-being of our children. And that's the greatness I see in you. You are a beacon of that light of well-being.
Oh my gosh. I feel so... and on the receiving end, I know you're not just saying those words, and I feel it. It fills my heart. I let that sink in for me, and it's very generous. I deeply appreciate it. I loved our time together. It just flew by like a 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
We can have conversations for hours, and I want to learn from you. I want to hear more stories, and your spirit comes through this. And I'm very touched that you shared, more personal things as well. Yes, we didn't cover much about the approach, but I'm going to have Dr. Elizabeth Sylvester on the podcast too. I contacted her. So we will do the practical part of the approach then. So this was the background. This was the foundation. This was the story. I think this is important. And I'm I'm so honored that you said yes. And I'm so glad that I found this at the time that I did. I think there's always a reason, how things sync up in the world for people. And so I really appreciated every moment of it, your generous heart. I can feel your creative, intense, emotional, sensitive energy, and that type of a person you are. And I'm somewhat similar, maybe not to that degree. I don't know. I don't do woodworking but I would love to meet you in person for sure one day. And I would give you a hug. It was truly an honor. I'm really moved. And I'm
likewise honored.
Thank you so much.
I am likewise honored. And I feel like the backstory is perfect as a prelude to Dr. Sylvester. You're going to love Elizabeth. She can talk about the nuts and bolts. And I think knowing kind of the thrust of this approach is really part of what I strive for when I do certification trainings and set people up to be teachers of this work. Is I want them to know the thinking behind the thinking. And I feel like you dug in and dug that out, and I relished it. I really love sharing these threads of the conversation.
Oh,
it's been an honor.
Yeah, likewise. And see, we showed how it's done in real life, the true appreciation, and
yeah. I'm going to take home the greatness of being a generous heart. I that hit home. So I am owning that. I am the greatness of a generous heart. Thank you for that gift.
Oh, thank you, Howard. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
That concludes today's conversation, my dear listener, and I hope you enjoyed it. I sure did. It was truly an honor and pleasure discovering and connecting with Howard. I was really touched and moved by his story. I want to know, what's your biggest takeaway from this conversation? Are you inspired? Get in touch. Send me a note to the email info@authenticparenting.com. Leave me a voicemail. Call the number 732-763-2576. And for you, my international listener, there is a special tool which is free on the contact page of my website, authenticparenting.com/contact. Some big changes are coming in the authentic parenting community. I don't know for sure what, when, and how, but I will be closing down my Facebook group as I am deeply frustrated with the platform. It appears that every time I post in my own group as an admin, Facebook shows my posts to less and less people. So it's pointless, and I don't want to waste my time and my efforts. So we need to migrate to a new home, find a new place so that we can remain connected and continue the support calls, the pod club, and everything else that's happening in our community. I will probably record a short announcement in the near future, so keep your ears open for that. And for now, get in touch if you have comments, feedback, questions. My personal contact info is always accessible. Until next week, connect to the present moment, to yourself and your children. I am Anna Seewald. Thank you so much for listening.